Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and as is the case every single day, I am really excited to be here with you today. And I'm really excited to share with you some really important information specific to this time of year because it's upon us, folks. Right? We are right in the thick of the holiday season, and it's really easy to refer to the holiday season as the most stressful time of the year. Right? It's the most beautiful time of the year, but it's also the most stressful time of the year. Right? We have all this stuff going on, and in addition to our normal, pressures and things going on in our lives, as whether we're parents or not parents, doesn't matter. We've got so much going on in our lives all the time, and now all of a sudden at the end of the year, we just get all of this extra, pressure put on us, right? We have travel that we have to do. Maybe you're not traveling this year, but then you have to figure out Zoom calls with your family. There's gift buying. There's the holiday shopping, thing that goes on, right? There's holiday parties that you might need to plan and cook for and this kind of stuff. There's just a lot going on, right? And again, it's very easy to call this or to refer to this as the most stressful time of the year, right? Like all of these different things that you have to do, it's easy to call them stressful things to do, but that's not really accurate. Right? The accurate way to refer to this time of year and to all of those different things that are going to maybe trigger your stress is that it is the most stress-inducing time of the year. And the reason I make that distinction, and it's a very important distinction, is that the stress that you're feeling is not the shopping. It is not the gift wrapping. It is not the if you're a parent, it's not the 3 times a day that your young children come to you and want to revise their Christmas list, after you've already bought half the stuff that they asked for. It's not all that stuff that is the stress, right? Those are the stressors. And what the stress is how you are reacting to those things within your body. Right? The physical reaction to these mental and emotional pressures, right? And that's the thing. And even, the reason I say that's a very important distinction to make, or it's a very helpful distinction to make, because by looking at it as not the thing itself, right? Not the dinner that you have to cook for the holidays or what have you, but instead it's the reaction that you have that is the stress, right? Looking at it that way, automatically, what that does is that puts a little space, right? That it puts a little bit of space in between the massive, things that you have to do and, your sort of, reaction or response to them. Right. And so just looking at them as an objective kind of non-identifying kind of thing, this is something we've talked about here before, it really helps to already, kind of release a little bit of that pressure, right? It's like like on a steam boiler, right? There's a little, pressure valve that opens up when the pressure builds too much and let some of it out, right? So just looking at it that way alone can often be a big help. Okay, so try to remember that, right? That the things that you have to do are not the stress, right? That stress is coming from is coming from your reaction and your perception of these things. And generally speaking, what that means is that when you perceive these things as being something that's going to harm you, right? Anytime you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get everything done. Oh my gosh, I'm going to, people are not going to like my mashed potatoes and stuff like that, right? Like as soon as you start thinking that way, that's when the stress is going to start happening, right? And of course, this time of year, again, there's so many of these opportunities, so many of these stressors that are coming into our lives that are there to just tweak us and get us to think those thoughts. And as we think those thoughts, well, that's when, again, we get into the stress response. And the problem with that is that when we're in the stress response, that is when we are at our lowest point of productivity, of logic, of understanding, of capability in every single way. So by engaging in the stress response, you're actually creating more of the stress response, right? Because you're more likely to do things that are not going to make things easier for you, but instead make things more difficult for you, and therefore you're going to have more stress, right? Now, of course, one of the biggest stressors for all of us, right, is having, and it's not that we don't love our parents and our families and our aunts and uncles and grandparents, if you have grandparents still, it's not that we don't love them, right? But it is really stressful to go see them, right? It's really hard to go see them, right? It's a very stressful experience, right? And you're not alone with that, right? That is something that is so universal. In fact, one of my favorite quotes ever, especially as a mindfulness teacher, right, is Ram Dass, right? Ram Dass is a spiritual teacher, formerly a Harvard and Stanford psychology professor. Obviously a PhD. He passed 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, or something like that. 2 3 years. He passed recently, but before that, he was considered revered as a very, very highly educated and highly trained and very enlightened being, right? Who went from this collegiate thing to this real world renowned spiritual teaching and stuff, and also he learned from some of the greatest the most the most awakened and enlightened gurus all over India and Asia, right? So like the guy's the real deal. So what I'm trying to tell you. And so what he said, he has this quote that says, "If you think you're enlightened, go and spend a week with your family. And then tell me how you feel," right? And that's how universal this is. So especially if you have been working on mindfulness and you have been trying to get yourself to this place of handling stressors without stress, right? Then going to see your parents is likely going to trigger you in a very big way. Okay. Now, before I get into the rest of because there's a reason for that. I'm going to discuss that in a second. But before I do that, I want to make a real quick announcement here, okay? Because I know a lot of people don't get to watch the whole videos here. These are very long videos. So right now, I'm going to make this announcement that starting next week, okay, from Monday through Friday of next week, 5 days, I am going to be conducting a sort of, mini coaching program. You could call it like a stress reduction boot camp if you want. It's just kind of came to me just yesterday, the day before. I know I didn't plan it out very well, so I'm going to try to hustle tonight and get the website kind of built for it. But basically what it's going to be is 5 days, 5 practices. Okay, I'm going to give you some very simple practices you can start doing immediately. Okay, it's not going to take more than 5 or 10 minutes a day. Okay, so it's not something that's going to turn your life around, but it is going to be something that you can start to do now, so that even in the 3 weeks from now, when we're 2 weeks from now, when we're getting into the whether you're traveling for the holidays or you're stuck at home for the holidays, you're going to deal with your children not seeing grandparents and that kind of thing. Whatever it is, anywhere in that spectrum that you fall, these tools are going to help you to maintain a level of homeostasis, which is the opposite of stress. So if you're interested in that, just let me know via a comment or send me an email, okay? art@artburnscoaching.com. Just send me an email and I will get back to you with some details. It's going to be very, very simple. It's going to be done on Zoom. So every day we'll just meet on a Zoom call. It's going to be a group of people. I will record the sessions. So if you can't make each one of the sessions, you can watch the replay, and I will be available for email support. And like I said, each day is going to be a new practice. And I'm going to go with the universal internet loved price for this, for $97 for the 5 days. Okay, so it's a very, very economic way to kind of handle your stress. So if you're interested, again, art@artburnscoaching.com. All right, and like I said, I'll be sending out some emails and making more announcements about this for the next couple days. But I really do urge you to get into it, because it's going to be a lot of fun and it's going to be really, really helpful for you. Okay, for all of us. Okay, so why is it, right? Like Ram Dass is no dummy, right? Like I said, I mean the guy taught, psychology at Stanford and Harvard, right? So I mean he's not, this is not somebody I met at a cafeteria and wrote down this quote on the back of a napkin, right? I mean this guy's a real deal, very, very intelligent and educated person. So how is it that we are, why is it that our family, triggers us in this way? Right? And they do, right? And again, it's not that we don't love them, and that has nothing to do with it, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with it. What it has to do with is how the perception of who we are or who we used to be, right, lives inside of your parents, nervous system and in their mind, right? So in other words, your parents have this view of you, right, that is based not on what you are today or who you are today. And again, this is especially true if you've been working on, releasing some of your, implicit trauma and implicit reactivity and stress that's caused. And if you've done this work for yourself, right, this is even more apparent for you, right, that you are not the person. But even if you're not doing this work, you're not the person that you were even 5 minutes ago, right? So certainly, going back 10 years or 5 years or even 20 years or 25 years for me, right? Like 25 years ago, I was already moved out of my family's house. So for me, it'd be even going back like, 40 years, right? Like I am not the person I was 40 years ago. Right, but in your parents' eyes, right, they are, kind of they are perceiving you, right, and reacting to that perception that is inside them, that is based on this entire subcontext of your entire past, right? Specifically and mostly that time when they lived with you, when you lived with them, right? Like that's what they've known you for, right? And again, they have their own sort of ideals for how you should be. Right? It's not their fault that they feel this way, and it's not that you should be angry with them or anything like that for it, but you should recognize it, right? That is what is happening inside their minds, right? They are looking at you as the person that you have always been, right? I often talk to people, I have done some work with couples with mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is a great way to save a marriage, I'll tell you that. It saved mine, and it saved many others that I know of. And one particular one I have had a hand in doing, actually more than one. But anyway, the idea is that when we are, when we are present, well, I'm sorry, what I tell people who are in marriages that are having a hard time, right, and this goes with even, children, right, that when you're having a discussion with your spouse, right, you're not just having a discussion right here, right now with your spouse, right, you're having a discussion that includes all of the subcontext since every day, since the moment you met, right? Every experience, every word, every emotion that has transpired between you two, since that moment you met, that is all contained in every word that we speak to each other. Right? I know it's really hard to imagine that that's true, but it is true, right? You are, again, the whole thing about, what's happening around us is not necessarily what's happening outside of us, but it's how we're perceiving the things that are happening, right? Like if I pointed to a bush outside, you and I would both agree that that is a green bush, right? But it's not. Right? It's only green because the light that's bouncing off of it, the photons are bouncing off of it, coming through the mechanism of our eyes and being processed by the occipital lobe in the back of our brain that is translating into what we call green. Right? If you put a dog in front of that bush, it's going to look gray. If you put like a salamander in front of that bush, it's going to be glowing with colors that you and I can't even see. We can't even perceive them. So what I'm saying here is that the bush is not green. We are perceiving it as what we call green. Okay, and the same thing is true for how we're perceiving each other, right? Like when you're talking to your family members, right? You are not talking to this person who is this independent, kind of standalone, completely encapsulated thing, right? You're talking to what you understand them to be. And that understanding is based on, again, that whole subcontext of everything that has happened the entire time that you've known each other. Right. And so think about what that means for parents, right? And for siblings, right? I mean, they've known you since the first breath you took, right? And that's especially true again for people who are working on themselves, right? Like when you're working on yourself, let's assume that we see our parents, a few times a year, which is high for a lot of people, right? And so if we see our parents only a few times a year, it's very, very likely that we've changed completely since the last time we even saw them. But they don't have any context for that. They do not have any subcontext that they can understand that through. So for them, when you walk in the door, you're still that person who you were when you were, 15, 20, 25, or the last time you saw them at least. Right. And so what that means is that, they're going to react to you. They're going to ask you questions that are going and this is where Ram Dass talks about this, that he said, like, after he went on this whole spiritual journey, he spent years in India living at monasteries and really, spending hours and hours, chanting and meditating and through this spiritual growth process, right? And he gets home and it took his dad one single question to set him off. And the simple question was like, do you have a job? Like something like that. Like that's the way our parents talk to us, right? Because that's what they know, right? And so what this becomes is or what is reflected here is the way in which our present and even our future is a reflection of our past, right? That's an important thing to understand. Again, very much important, just like understanding that the things that are happening out there are not the stress. They're not the things that are the stress. They're the things that are causing the stress that's part of our perception, right? Same kind of principle. Right? That when we're talking to somebody, when your parents are talking to you, right, they are perceiving you as this, as a little child, right? They are. The same way you are. If you're a parent, you know the same thing, right? Like your child is now, my kids, let me use myself as an example, right? My kids are now 9 and 12 years old, right? But I still see them as, the same as they were when they were 2 and 5 years old, right? Because I've been with them the whole time and I've seen this whole thing. But to them, they're nothing like they were when they were 2 or 5 years old, right? They've grown completely. Their understanding of the world has changed enormously. Their physical brain holds no resemblance to what they were 5 to 10 years ago. Right? It's just not the same. But yet for me, my perception of them, I'm still asking them things like, hey, did you brush your teeth tonight? Right? I mean, my daughter's 12 years old. She tells me next time you, this is really a rule that she's made. She says, every time somebody asks me about my teeth, I'm specifically not going to brush them. So she's teaching me, right? But that's the thing, right? Like I am likely to do things that I feel are right, right? I'm only trying to help. I'm not trying to upset her. I'm just trying to help her not get cavities so she doesn't have to go to the dentist, which of course she doesn't want to either, right? But the idea is that it's my perception of this, right? It has nothing to do with her or her teeth. It has to do with what I perceive as my relationship to her, right? And so this brings up something that I was in a coaching call just the other day, a coach that I get coached by, and it was part of a constellation. It's a kind of form of a group kind of meditation experience. If you want more information, hit me up. I'll have to explain. It'll have to be a conversational explanation because I'm very new to it, and it's something that's that's kind of a very it's a slippery kind of concept. But maybe someday I'll do more videos on it. But anyway, during this constellation, one of the terms that came up, and it's kind of like you represent things in a constellation, right? And one of the things that one of the people in this constellation was representing was called the entangled past. And I thought this was a really, really wonderful term, right? The entangled past, because that's what I'm talking about here, right? We are entangled in this thing that we call the past, right? Which is this time that we were at a certain place of our development, physically, emotionally, mentally. That's what, when we had a relationship with someone during a given point of our own development, right? It's almost like it gets entangled and almost stuck there, right? It's almost like getting frozen, right? Like it's like encapsulated, right? And that's where I have this thing about, hey, did you brush your teeth, because it's time to go to bed. Even though my kids are old enough to do that, they don't need me to help them with that, but I have such a hard time unentangling myself from that past, right? And this happens with everyone, right? It happens with our kids, it happens with our spouses, it happens with our friends, it happens with our teachers, our whoever, right? And the thing is that when we're entangled in this past, right, we're not honoring the growth that everybody is going through, right? And that's, again, I'm going to refer back to when I said that if you've been doing the work to develop mindfulness, right, and then all of a sudden you go back into this other place and people are treating you like you're the same person that you were before you did the mindfulness, it's like, well, hold on, I'm not that person anymore. Why are you treating me like this, right? And that's what I mean. You're like entangled in it, right? But here's the fascinating thing, and the reason why that word entangled was really like jumped out at me, right? The word entanglement comes up in physics quite a bit, right? And the idea is that the concept of entanglement, when you talk about in physical terms, right? They've done experiments, many experiments, right? This is not something that's necessarily even that new at this point, right? But they have had experiments where they've taken a couple of particles, right, that were once entangled with one another, right? They were once attached, kind of swirling around each other's, stuck in each other's gravity, if you will, right? So two electrons, let's say, right? And they can take those electrons, right, and they can separate them, right? Now the electrons still exist, even though they've been separated, and they're still spinning the way that they were spinning, right? They're both going in the same direction that they were going, right? And they can separate these electrons by vast distances, right? Like miles and miles and miles, right? And what happens is that, even though these two particles are now separated in vast differences, they are still entangled. And what happens is, if they take this electron and they reverse its direction, right? They instead of spinning like this, they make it spin like this. This other one that could be miles and miles away, with no time or space delay, right? As though it is still, attached to that other electron, will reverse its direction as well, right? So, and again, it happens immediately. And it happens without any kind of delay of anything. So it's as if they are still right next to each other, even though they're, thousands of miles apart potentially, right? So of course, this has very little to do with mindfulness, but the idea is that this entanglement, right? That when we can kind of look at ourselves as entangled with these people who we've known for all our lives, right? When we can kind of approach it knowing that this is the case, right? Well, now we can be prepared for it. And now we can do things that will mitigate the frustration that we might feel and the challenges that we might feel, right? And this also goes for how you're perceiving your parents' tendencies as well, right? Everybody's got those things that people do that just get up our sleeves, right? And so you can address that entangled past of your own, right? The way that you see your parents, even though, your parents have changed a lot too, right? So anyway, the whole point of this that I'm talking about is the ability to be aware of what is really happening, right? And that's the key to mindfulness. And through the practices that I'm going to teach you next week, if you join my little program here, you will have the understanding to be able to, and the skill to be able to walk into a situation and not see it as part of your entangled past, but instead see it as part of what we might call your emergent future, right? Which is seeing things as the moment right now as it moves forward in time, right? And that alone, the whole concept of time and stuff, we should talk about that at a different time. But the idea though is that we could also release some of that entanglement, the psychological and emotional entanglement that we have for our parents and for our siblings and for our cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and everything else, right? So again, if you'd like to learn more about this, okay, please, I really encourage you to join this program because it's going to be awesome, okay? And we're going to talk about this a lot, okay? So if you're interested in that, join the program. But if you just have questions, I'm willing to answer those questions as well. So please feel free to email me at art@artburnscoaching.com, whether you want to get into the program next week or you just want to ask a question. I'd love to hear from you, okay? Aside from that, please, all the YouTube things, okay? Do them. It's starting to work. I'm getting more and more views on these videos, and it's really exciting. I just looked yesterday, and according to YouTube analytics, 86% of the people who watch these videos are watching them because they're suggested on other videos that they're seeing. That's the algorithm, right? So the more that you can, like, subscribe, comment, and share these videos, the more that's going to happen, and the more people I'm going to get to reach. And these are people who could really, there's potentially people who could really use the help that I could provide with these videos. Okay, so please like, subscribe, share, comment, do all those things. And on the podcast side, all you podcast listeners out there, if you could please rate and review. Okay, just go into the place where you're listening to the podcast. They'll give you an opportunity somewhere to give a rating. You can rate me with as many stars or balloons or whatever it is as you see fit. Okay, don't lie, but give them an honest answer. And if you can write a little review, that'd be wonderful too. All right. Again, it helps with the algorithm. Also helps people, like when they see that review, they're maybe going to be more likely to listen to a couple of podcasts. And again, you never know how you might help someone. Okay, so please do all those things if you can. And if you're interested in this stress reduction intensive, 5 days, 5 practices, about 5 hours of your time, and things could completely change. So art@artburnscoaching if you're interested in that, and I'll get right back to you. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. I wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.